Infosys was recently fined €175,000 by French labor authorities because its system for recording employee working time did not comply with the French labor regulations. And this is not the first time Infosys or some of the biggest IT companies from India have faced scrutiny from regulators abroad. Infosys, in fact, paid $34 million to settle allegations that alleged that employees were brought to the United States on a B1 visitor visa to perform work that should have required H1B visa. TCS has faced similar cases. In 2013, it settled a class action lawsuit where the workers alleged that TCS required them to surrender US tax refunds and deducted their Indian salaries from their American compensation. More recently, a US federal jury found that Cognizant had engaged in a pattern of intentional discrimination against non-Indian workers. These are not merely isolated complaints about one manager or office. Across different cases, we see questions involving working time records, visa manipulation, wage deductions, tax refunds, and discrimination. The impression one gets is that Indian employers believe they can export the same corporate culture and the same institutional leniency they enjoy in India to countries with much stricter labor protections. So in this video, I want to talk about the hypocrisy of Indian employers. And of course, there is a long list of things we could talk about, but I want to keep my argument to just a couple of them. The first piece of hypocrisy I find particularly irritating is the 70-hour work week. Infosys co-founder Narayan Murthy has famously argued that young Indians should work 70 hours a week. But notice how he's framing it. He's not saying work 70 hours because companies like Infosys will get more labor. The additional labor you give to a private corporation becomes nation-building exercise. This is remarkably convenient. The profits remain private, but the sacrifice is nationalized. The second problem here is the privilege. It is much easier to recommend 70-hour work weeks when you occupy a position where many ordinary demands on your time can be outsourced. Most employees don't finish work and teleport into bed. They commute, they cook, they clean, they buy groceries, they take care of their children and elderly parents. And much of this is unpaid care work in India, which still falls disproportionately on women. There is an enormous difference between a founder choosing to work 70 or 100 hours, building an asset in which he has ownership, and employees being told to work 70 hours for somebody else's company in the name of patriotism. The incentives are completely different. And then there is the third problem, and perhaps the most ridiculous one. Why are we assuming that 70 hours means 70 productive hours? Research on working hours consistently finds diminishing returns. Major 4-day week trials have found out that many organizations can substantially reduce working hours while maintaining revenues and dramatically improving employee well-being, retention, and sick leave. And this is particularly important when we are talking about knowledge work. Research on creativity shows something called an incubation effect. Sometimes you solve a difficult problem precisely because you stop working on it for a while. A meta-analysis found that periods away from the problem can improve subsequent problem solving, particularly for divergent thinking tasks. So guess who works donkey hours? Donkeys. The 40-hour week itself became normalized during the industrial era. Ford famously introduced the 5-day, 40-hour week for factory workers in 1926, partly because even industrial employers understood that there were limits to what longer hours could accomplish. And now, almost 100 years later, when many employees are supposedly being hired to think, solve problems, write software, and innovate, we are being told that the solution is simply to sit at the desk for 70 hours. I don't think Narayan Murthy is a donkey to understand this. He's not a moron, which leaves me a more uncomfortable possibility. This isn't really an argument about innovation or productivity. Maybe it's simply an argument for extracting more labor from its employees. And that brings me to the second piece of corporate rhetoric. We are a family. Indian companies love this phrase. TCS itself has publicly referred to its workforce as TCS family. Again, families don't calculate over time, so calling an organization a family converts an economic relationship into a moral relationship. Suddenly, doing more without demanding more becomes loyalty. But something interesting happens when economic conditions change. TCS chairman N. Chandrasekaran recently said that the company could eventually have as many AI agents as human employees, and acknowledged that TCS would not hire people in the numbers it used to. So, apparently this corporate family is remarkably flexible. When technology can perform some of your work more cheaply, the definition of who belongs becomes considerably less sentimental. And if you actually want to take the family metaphor literally, research on real family firms makes it even more interesting. Family business researchers have documented that family and non-family employees are treated very differently. Research also shows that non-family CEOs can be more vulnerable when performance deteriorates. Family CEOs receive greater protection, while outsiders are more likely to be held responsible and dismissed when things go wrong. There is also a talent problem. If ambitious professionals believe that most important positions will ultimately be reserved for somebody with the correct surname, why should the very best outsiders spend their careers competing in a tournament that is already rigged? So when an employer says we are a family, perhaps the right question is, which member of the family am I? Because there seems to be one version of the family when you are being asked to work late, sacrifice your weekend, and demonstrate loyalty, and another version when promotions, ownership, succession, layoffs, or AI substitution are being discussed. That, to me, is the hypocrisy. If you want employees to work longer because it increases profits, just say so. If you want to replace some employees with AI because it reduces costs, just say so. If employment is an economic transaction, treat employees honestly as participants in that transaction. But don't privatize the profits and nationalize the sacrifice. Don't call employees family when the relationship suddenly becomes strictly economic the moment that becomes convenient for the employer. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll see you next time with another important idea at Devil Wears Data.